to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sherry, would you do roll call?
Erica Connor?
Here.
Mary DeMore? Here. Joel Fredericks?
Here.
Andy Mankey?
Here.
Art Schneider?
Excused, coming in a little bit.
Craig Burtz?
Here.
Jeff Vogel?
Here.
Jill Warner? Here. Terry Winchell? Here.
Okay, this is an open meeting and has been noticed as such, beginning with citizens' comments. We have
None
none.
tonight.
Okay, and then we will jump right into our first student rep reports with Emily and Shannon.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily. We just switched names for the night, just kidding. I'm Shannon. So the first thing on our report is from the McWanago High School that the McWanago boys soccer team hosted its second annual soccer camp. The high school players and coaches taught students from grades K through 9 various soccer skills, teamwork, and the importance of having fun. This year, they are proud to announce that the camp had a record number of sign-ups, and they plan to continue this excellent learning experience in the future.
At Prairie View Elementary School, the students have been completing a PBS Summer Reading Challenge that they've been calling PBS Reads. And the students are encouraged to post a selfie or a picture or something that they can post on their social media sites, and just to help keep students reading and active during the summer.
Now from Rolling Hills Elementary School. Rolling Hills had another successful week of Camp Invention this summer from July 15th through the 19th. So shout out to staff member Melissa Barton for running this program for another great year. Upcoming in August, several staff members from the Rolling Hills Raptor Way Committee will be attending the state PBIS conference. Rolling Hills would like to thank the building and ground staff for working very hard to install the Ability Whirl and more swings on the playground at school. Staff members Mrs. Gorman and Mrs. Ziegler have continued to help students throughout the summer through Rolling Hills summer reading and math programs. Specifically, Mrs. Ziegler conducted her 5th summer book club program by partnering with the public library. Parents are able to bring their children to the front desk of the library, pick up a reserved copy of the books she assigns, read the book, take notes, and be ready to discuss at the book club meetings at the library. Ms. Ziegler finds it very important to provide a fun and free way to keep children reading during the summer.
There have been a few fun things going on at Section this summer. So first off, they're changing their well-known Section Fest to something called Section Startup. And it's still that welcomes students back to the new school, and they just get to learn about the opportunities and going on throughout the school and different organizations. They're also doing their Math Mania again. It's a 6-week program, and you count the number of math minutes that you do each week. And then at the end of each week, you can get a small prize, and if you do a certain number of minutes across all 6 weeks, you get to attend a party at the end of the summer. Also, they're doing a new thing called Connect First Conferences, and it's for students going into first grade to help ease the jump from kindergarten to first grade. So the teachers for first grade are offering conferences for parents to come in and connect early so they can get to know each other and talk about their kids.
So district-wide, for the MASD summer school program, over 50 second and 5th through 5th graders participated in a summer choir. These students had only 4 weeks of rehearsal before they finished the month with an amazing performance for the younger summer school classes, family, and friends in the Greenwald Foundation PAC. Ms. Doty would like to add thank you to the McWanago Area School Board for your continued support of the arts in our community. Let's keep McWanago singing. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Good job, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have the approval of board minutes from August 5th, 2019, as well as approval of vouchers numbers 124060 to 124167 in the amount of $982,000 and change. Are there any questions or concerns? Hearing none, it is approved by consent. Moving along to action items. We have appointments, resignations, and retirements.
So we have one resignation tonight, and it's one that I had mentioned to you last meeting. That's Joe Stiglitz, who was our Dean of Students at Parkview Middle School. Do you want to do the appointments at the same time?
We can do them separately. I will make a motion to approve the resignation of Mr. Stiglitz.
Second.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
And then we have several appointments, and many of them are part-time positions, but we wanted to bring them all to you. So Shannon Lang will be our new homebound instructor. Melanie Von Thun, a kindergarten teacher at Big Bend, and that's an additional kindergarten section because they have over 75 students in kindergarten at Big Bend this year. Patricia Neese, who will be the interventionist at Prairie View, that's a half-time position. Becky Rail, who will be an interventionist at Eagleville, another half-time position. Tori Farney, 5th grade teacher at Prairie View, half-time. Many of those are due to, the 5th grade position is due to high numbers at Prairie View. So they'll have 2.5 sections in 5th grade. Julie Kirchie, Spanish teacher, Eagleville, that's a 20% position. Cheryl Dufek, 3rd grade teacher at Big Bend Elementary, half-time. So if you recall, some parents had come to the board meeting last month, expressed some concerns, and so instead of having instructional assistants, which they didn't seem to care for, we're going to have a half-time teacher. So that half-time teacher will be there, I believe, in the morning. Can't quite remember if it's morning or afternoon, but they'll split the classes 4 ways instead of 3 ways for that. Or is it 3 ways instead of 2? I can't remember exactly how many sections. I think they have 2 sections, and now we'll have 3 in the morning for math and reading. Tracy Stockwell, 3rd grade teacher at Clarendon. That's a 1-year position. Elena Burlage, 6th grade teacher at Rolling Hills, 1 year. Scott Sikarsky, math and computer science teacher at McGuanago High School. Amy Dahl, and that's a 1-year position, limited term. Amy Dahl, Title I at Big Bend. The rest are all title positions. Amanda Turka, title at Clarendon. Diane Pollock, title at Clarendon. Renee Hansen, title at Prairie View. Carol Winkler, title at Rolling Hills. And Sarah Schmidt, title at Rolling Hills. Many of those were Title I teachers for us last year, and they're returning.
I'd like to make a motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Why are the limited terms for the 3rd grade and especially the 6th grade at Rolling Hills? Why are they just limited terms?
So sometimes limited term are because of additional numbers. We're not sure that we'll have. So if you have high numbers at 3rd grade, doesn't necessarily mean when you go from 3rd grade to 4th grade that it will require 3 sections. So if we're,
Well, that's what I'm asking. Do you know what,
I'd have to-
is that the case, or, I mean,
So-
we can approve them, I just am curious as to.
that might be why we're doing it at 3rd grade, for example, because next year in 4th grade, the threshold for additional teachers is at a higher number of students. So that's why we hire them for a 1-year position. The 6th grade position at Rolling Hills may be 1 year because oftentimes when we make a late hire, late August, the pool is not as strong, and so sometimes we decide to do a 1-year
That was-
position
okay.
instead of a permanent position.
That answers my question.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Okay.
And then I forgot, could we move to number 4 with the Town of Mugwanago election site discussion?
Sure.
So Kathy is here, the clerk of Mugwanago, and I know, Kathy, you have a number of different positions with the Town of Mugwanago, and you can add that. But if you recall, last month, or last meeting, we talked about the fact that the Town of Mugwanago is struggling with their locations for voting. Hillside Church and the Town Hall are not large enough for the large turnout elections, and so they have requested that they use Rolling Hills. And you guys had some questions last meeting and asked that Kathy be present at this meeting to try to address some of your concerns. So Kathy, if you want to move up to the microphone and get yourself comfortable.
My
And-
deputy, Gail Obranovich, is
Oh.
here as well.
I'm sorry, Gail. I apologize. You're certainly welcome to move up to the table, too. Everybody's welcome.
Tax letter Gail? Hi, Gail. Tax letter Gail.
So just so you know, some of our school board members are Town of Mugwanago residents. A number of them are, and so they may have other concerns. I don't know if they're going to share them tonight. But do you guys had some questions?
Well, I guess I'll start. Security is a concern of mine with the number of voters going in and out of the school. You know, security with our students and our staff is first and foremost my concern. And how do you plan to address, how do I say this, unscreened people? Because when a parent comes into our schools, they're screened by Raptor, and we take the security at all of our schools very seriously. So to have, how many thousands of people pass through Rolling Hills on Election Day? How do you plan to guarantee that there will be absolutely no security concerns?
Well, I did take a walk through the school earlier this year, and my concern as well was it needed to be a place that was segregated from the actual learning area of the kids. So the area that we looked through and we walked through was the north end of the building that has its own entrance, and inside that, is it like a gym or is it a?
Yeah, it's a gym.
People that come in there, vote, and leave have no access to the actual building itself. So all the doors can be locked.
But they're
Um,
still inside the structure.
Correct. But in order to go beyond there, they'd have to go back outside, and then they'd have to enter through your secured area through being buzzed in.
That's correct.
So that's why I felt it would be okay. The other thing is, we will have, our police department has 100% been happy to say that they will be down there during your school hours. And they can be in the school itself, work intermingling with the kids as they've done, I think sporadically,
Mhm.
they've done that before. Park the squad out in front. So I'm pretty comfortable with knowing that our police department will be involved, their presence will be there, and that the area is secluded from the rest of the building, that I would think that would.
And I think it's short term as far as, if we plan ahead, we could have maybe possibly a day off for the big elections, correct?
So that's something that this board would have to have a conversation about, but.
There are other communities, as you gave us.
Right, and so I should note that Kathy put a document together for you. It's at your seat tonight. We just added that right when she came, so if you want to take a look at what some other municipalities do. But back to Craig's point, for the next large election, which is the presidential primary in Wisconsin, which is in April, right?
No, the February and April are spring, and those are your locals and, some circuit judges. Those are usually not, the percent is, you're lucky if you see 20%. It's every other, in the even years, August and November. And August is not even that big because people don't like to do the primary where they have to pick a party and vote. So we don't even get a big turnout for August, which you're not in session. The school's not in session. It's every other year, the even years in November.
Okay, so that would be the 2021
Yes.
school year, November, not this coming November, obviously, but November of 20.
Yeah.
So in the next few months, we'll be having conversations closer to October, November about the following year's calendar. So if that's something that you would support, then you would let us know in the next couple months that, yeah, we should take the day off on the presidential election.
And the governor, I think, is just as busy. So that's every other, so, in 2020 is the presidential, and 2022 is the governor. So those are the two big ones that, and as you can see, the sheet that I passed out, and I apologize, I didn't get more municipalities, but we asked this kind of on Friday or Thursday. Brookfield does the same thing. So their school board has what you in service days for their election, so the kids are not in session.
Mhm.
So that is one way to do that. City of Waukesha, I did reach out to them because they're a larger community as well. They just don't use schools because they're older and they don't meet the ADA standards for elections. So the school wanted them to fix it. They didn't have money to fix them, so they had to move on and find something else. They have other things they can pick from. In the town, we're very, very limited. And we had to leave and separate. We have some at the town hall and some at the church. And the church, whereas it works for now, it's a odd-shaped room, and it's very hard to get traffic in and out of there because it's kind of congested. But we had issues with parking over there, and people were parking in the town park, and there was issues walking to the building, so we had liability issues, so we had to separate that. So having it at the school and everybody in one place, my DPW department, I have a superintendent and a crewman, they would be down there for the day as well, manning parking. They put up all the signage. They would make sure traffic's flowing, as well as the police department, so.
So I guess the question that I have then, you just kind of brought it up, who accepts all liability for voters?
That whenever you have people on your property, it's
It
a
would be
shared
us, right?
liability, but I don't have a complete answer. We'd have to talk to EMC, our liability carrier, and see what our liability is.
That's ours too. And we could provide a certificate of liability or something as well.
So it'd be similar to what we did this past summer
Yeah.
when we had the village using our property here
Balloon
for the
Fest.
Balloon Fest.
Right.
Mhm.
So you'll have an officer from the time the first voter comes till the last voter leaves there?
Yes, during the school time.
What about
If they want,
non-school?
they may stay longer depending on crowds, and sometimes, they're very, they make their presence known even at the places that we don't have schools, so, they love to be involved in your communities, so.
I do think that this discussion that we had last time, we didn't know yet where you were considering having it. There was discussion of possibly the library, possibly the gym. I think it offers me a bit of peace knowing that it would be the gym is what you're looking at, because it can be completely closed off. However, I think parking's a big problem, so it might be a discussion that we need to have if we decide to move forward with this about the calendar, because there's not a ton of parking at Rolling Hills. So to have our staff there, which kind of takes up most of it to begin with, and the way the buses come in, we might have to have that discussion if we want to keep school going forward, but I'm comfortable with the security measures and the fact that it's a separate place.
They must have some sort of temporary parking with Grandparents' Day and things like that, like every school does, where the staff is able to park in the back
Mhm.
and
So we've done that for the
everything
pancake
else
breakfast, et
altered.
cetera.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
So
So
if they know ahead, I think they can flush out a lot of spots.
So I think we're looking tonight for you guys a thumbs up, thumbs down, and then we'll start to work with Kathy and her staff about the parking, the security, et cetera. But if you didn't want us to do this at all, we wanted to know ahead of time before we got too far down the road planning and figuring out the details.
We have to do a resolution as well at the hall before we do anything, so.
Even with the parking, it moves quickly. I mean, hopefully, we try to get them in and out of there, 10 minutes they should be in and out.
But there would be no cost to you for us to use that building. That's for us to take care of, so.
I think the community should see our schools as well. I think
Yeah.
that's a great selling point for us.
So you
Anything
want a
else?
consensus or vote or what, or
It's an action item,
just,
Mhm.
so
okay.
if someone wants to make a
I'd like to make a motion that we go ahead with providing Rolling Hills for the spring, is it spring election this year?
For
Elections this year. Second.
So point of clarification, you're saying in your motion this year, like a trial basis?
Yeah,
There is none this year. We're
Oh.
done.
Well,
That's a perfect trial in our.
then it
So-
worked.
The problem,
like
We're
to
t- I
see-
think-
Future,
2020.
Art's talking about the school year, so is there a presidential primary in the spring?
there,
So,
Okay, got it.
there is,
there, right,
There-
because some of us school board members will be on that in April.
So, so the primary's February, and we never know that until the beginning of January.
okay.
And if we have a February primary, I guarantee you're lucky to see less than, we'll probably see 8% or 10% of the voters. They don't turn out for the primary. And then April is the first Tuesday every April, will be the spring,
Okay.
so.
However, it sounds like they're also looking ahead to the presidential,
Right.
which is 2020, so the
But I
motion
would
have to-
say for the spring election, see how it works and then go from there.
Well, we have voters that get confused, so if we do this and we send notices to everybody,
I'm sure it'll work out.
okay. It's just, they're gonna go, why are you sending me now? So.
Well, and if
there's-
they're having to make a resolution themselves for this,
Right.
we're either sort of committing to it
But
on maybe
what-
a longer trial basis than a year,
I
or
think-
we're not, is what I'm kind of thinking.
I'd be happy to come back
What kind of-
after election and address any issues, so we could work through
Well-
them.
So, I rest my.
As long as Art doesn't miss pancake breakfast, we're all good here.
That's
tell
why I just
me-
wanted to clarify your motion.
Well, so then
about-
there's more discussion. How long is a trial basis that the board feels comfortable?
How about through the 2020 elections, which would take it through December of next year. Because that would cover the spring, the primaries, and the fall election, correct?
Correct.
Well, and I think then you'd have a test of a smaller population of voters and then a much
Right.
larger population of voters to judge them.
All right,
Then
Cherry,
I agree with that.
Okay.
Let's make that motion.
Cherry,
All
did you
right.
want to add anything? No, that's
I
it?
want what the board wants.
Pancakes.
And then I'm happy to come back after that to,
All right.
to address. any
Did you
issues.
second that? Okay, cool.
And that's a friendly, we're good? We have a first and a second? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion carries.
I would like to make another comment. We had a great park and rec director, Toby Minogue. He was with us for 18 years, ran a fabulous park and rec program. And his wife got the job in Middleton as school superintendent, so they moved, and Toby got a full-time job in Portage. We are looking for a park and rec director, and it's difficult to find one that has all those qualifications. So
He's retired. He should.
Yeah.
I would just like to throw it out there that I know at one point we kind of looked at schools, and I know communities struggle with the park and rec. And if you reached out to the communities involved in your school district, I can say that I'd be thrilled to pay the school some of that fee to take that, the director of the park and rec program and run with it, because I hate to see it go away. I'm also fearful that if we don't get the right person to run it, I don't want to see it go down the tubes. So I would just ask if you could give it some thought, and if it's something that you're interested in, please reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be happy to come back, and I would you rah-rah that thought, so, okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
thanks.
All right, so we'll move back up to the 2019-20 budget and tax levy.
All right, so just taking this for you tonight to take action, hopefully that we can take this budget in front of the community here at the annual meeting and budget hearing in September. Are there any questions that I can answer from anyone?
Art, did you have a question on the budget?
No.
Oh. Okay. Anybody else? We've talked about this one a couple times.
Yeah, nothing's changed,
Nope.
correct,
Nope.
Tom?
Do we need a motion
Mm,
to
we
take this
do.
budget?
Yes.
I make a motion to take
And I would
proposed budget
second
to
that.
the annual meeting.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Sean.
Just a point of clarification, the budget and tax levy, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
As stated in the action item.
Well, we've talked about this one.
Yeah, we
Tom
talked
has
about this.
been educating us well.
Tom beat us up with PowerPoints for like the last 2 meetings.
All right, Neolia policy updates.
So these are the policies that we looked at the last meeting, and the Personnel Committee actually looked at them and forwarded them to the board. You were ready to approve them last meeting, but it was not an action item. So I'm anticipating that there will be little discussion, but obviously we're happy to answer questions.
I want to object. That's leading the witnesses.
Let's get make a motion.
Courtroom.
Let's get make a motion at, Art says not next meeting.
Granted.
I would like to make a motion. We go ahead with the approval of these said
Second.
policies.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? None? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Motion carries. Finance and facilities updates. MHS softball baseball project update.
All right, so we just want to keep you posted on where we're at with this right now. Following our last school board meeting where we discussed this, we reached out a little bit more, talked to the varsity coaches for baseball, softball, some other community members that might have an interest in using the facility. And what we found was that there is some interest in seeing this project done right, but in terms of doing that, there's financial commitments that perhaps are going to be made to make this take this beyond the scope that we initially planned. So as we make these plans, this is all tentative, but we need more time to work and allow for these community groups to figure out what they can contribute as we move forward here, so we can maximize this. There's some other things as well that we're considering here in terms of, one of the things we discussed was bathrooms at this facility. We do have some options that we're looking into in terms of extending plumbing that's in the south gym that we can make accessible on the exterior, on the very south side of the south gym. So as we kind of look at what are the options, this is something we just need a little more time to study. I know, Andy, you have reached out to some architects to work on some renderings, and that is, they're pretty busy. Can we say that?
Yeah, so the architect that we reached out to, the first one, we didn't get a call back from. The second one, we did get a call back. He's interested in assisting us. He was finishing up some projects that he had going currently. So in the next week, he's willing to sit down and talk to us about our needs. We've given him some conceptual drawings already, so we're confident we'll be able to put something together for you and the clubs that are looking to help out with this as well.
Correct. So
And the trades class are gonna jump in and start building when we decide to go there, right? Trades class are involved.
hasn't changed.
So we have 2 sections of building trades this year, so we need some projects for them, and so Dustin's working on that right now. Yep. So that was just an update.
Any questions on it?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll bring back more soon.
And this fun-looking capacity report is next.
Yes. And so Kurt and Andy are here to talk about the report that I shared with you last meeting. And like we said at that time, this is something that could become very relevant as we wait to see what happens with the Palmyra Eagle School District.
All right, well, I want to first walk you through the capacity report, and then we'll look at the screen as far as just the summary. But when you look at capacities in a building, often you think about code capacities, and that's really dictated on how many restroom facilities and what's your egress width. That's from a code standpoint. This educational capacity is really looking at you take the mission and the vision of a school district and how we want to educate our students, and say what's the maximum number of students ideally can we put in a school and still meet the mission and vision of the school district in educating those students. So in doing that, we put together I put together a report with that kind of walks through the whole process of how do we calculate that. We use some benchmark standards that are nationwide. We use some information as far as references on square feet per student, but really the bulk of the analysis was taking from board policy or board guidelines, what's the maximum number of students in a classroom, and then taking an adjustment for that for scheduling variances and scheduling inefficiencies, and multiplying that by the number of rooms that you have, and that calculates your educational capacity. So, for example, when you look at like an elementary school, those are easier to calculate than your middle school and your high school. But let's use Big Bend as an example. That building was built as a 3-section school when it was built, so 21 classrooms, so kindergarten through 6th grade, 21 total classrooms, 3 grade levels, or 3 classes per grade level. And we looked at how many students is the maximum number of students, so 1st grade, let's say, so I think it was 25, and multiplied the 25 times the number of 1st grade classrooms, and that gives us the total maximum capacity for 1st grade at Big Bend. Well, it's not feasible to say that if you have 3 1st grade classrooms and the maximum capacity by the board is 25 students per classrooms, it's not feasible to say that we're going to have 75. That's our target for 1st grade at Big Bend. So we put the adjustment in there of what's more realistic. It's about 12% reduction, and so that's what we're calculating our target capacity for. That's the basis of calculating all the schools is rides off of that. Does that process make sense? So when you get into the high school and Parkview, there's one additional factor that we need to factor in, and that is when you have a teacher that stays in that classroom, and she teaches, or he or she teaches 4 of the 5 periods of the day. There's also a utilization factor that you calculate in as well. So if that room 101, because the teacher stays in that room, we also make a deduction or reduction for of not that classroom not being used 100% of the day. So there's other variables that go into that. So the high school is a good example of where some changes that we obviously made construction changes at the high school, but we also made schedule changes at the high school. If we would have done nothing as far as construction and just made schedule changes, went from 8-period day down to the 5-period day, if we would have just done that, we would have increased our capacity just by making that change, because you're utilizing the rooms 4 of the 5 periods a day versus 6 of the 8 periods a day. So that just gives you an example of how some of the calculations and factors work into this. So I want to just look at, let me get the mouse here. I want to walk you through a specific detailed sheet. I think that one's one of
Oh, come on.
Not anymore.
You tricked me. I was trying to help you. I'm gonna sit and quiet.
I think that's what.
So really all the pages to this analysis, most of the pages of this analysis is the supporting information, so you can see where the calculations came from. And I'm not going to walk through all of them. I just want to walk through one of the detailed pages of Big Bend and break it down, so you can understand where we're at right now, what we're projecting, and then also see the history at each school. So this top section of the report, this is for Big Bend, and this is saying as of the 2018-19 school year, it breaks down what the current enrollment is, number of rooms used, and number of students per room. So that kind of gives you, this is what we're at right now as of last school year, okay? This second section here that's the calculation that figures out what the enrollment capacity, target capacity is. So as I described it, the number of rooms multiplied by the maximum class size, that references back to the board policy guidelines, and then an adjustment for the target. Really, the difference between maximum and target is the scheduling inefficiencies, and it's not realistic to say just because you have 25 students, you're going to have 25 in every classroom. And that totals out to your target capacity then. So in total for Big Bend, we're saying 527 students in Big Bend, right? Broken down by that grade level, which is an important piece. Obviously, you can't have 100 fifth graders and 60 fourth graders. It's got to be broken down proportionally. And then the last section of the detailed report is the enrollment history. So how did we compare over the previous 10 years is really what this is looking at. And so target capacity, as you'll see, stays consistent all the way across, and the historical enrollment is really looking at what the previous year's enrollment numbers were. And then the over-under is the delta, the difference between target and historic. So target capacity doesn't mean we can't go over, okay? If we do go over in a specific grade level, it's okay. We should start asking the question, why are we going over? What type of changes should we start be thinking of, right? So it's not saying that if we're 3 students over on a specific grade level, it's not saying that those kids aren't getting a good education. It's just once you start going past the target capacity, you really start to be asking the question. It's kind of like your indicator of we're starting to get full in a specific grade level. So Does that piece make sense? Then let's look at the summary then for the district, and then I'll also talk about some benchmark square foot analysis as a comparison. So really, the analysis really focused on that process as far as students per classroom and multiplying it and using the efficiency factor. I also included as just a reference point of square feet per student. So I put it all together on this summary sheet so we can see how each school compared to the target capacity, and then how we compared to other benchmarks out there as far as square feet per student. So
Page 47.
So for the top 6 schools are the elementary schools, with the enrollment is the first column. That was last year's enrollment, and then target capacity is what was calculated on those following pages. One other thing to note on those following pages, to make it clear what classrooms I was counting as being classrooms, we color coded those, right? So you'll notice that when you look at like a Big Bend Elementary, not every room is colored. I'm only counting the number of rooms that are colored, meaning those are classrooms. So I don't count a music room into my capacity because students are dedicated to like the 5th grade classroom, right? And they go to the music room for music class, and then they come back to that 5th grade classroom. So that doesn't count in my capacity. Only the colored coded rooms is what's counting to my capacity. So at Big Bend, we're showing 102 under target capacity. Okay, you got to dig in deeper to understand. Okay, is that what grade level is that? And it's not saying you can just add 100 people in there. It's got to be distributed based on where your capacities are, and it just goes right down the line. So in total, what it's telling us is we have room for 684 people. But obviously has to be balanced and proportional to the individual classes and schools accordingly.
So these are under, because you've got the parentheses on the over. So when I was reading this, it looked like you were over.
It's under. You're right. It's under
So
target.
that was my question. You
Yes.
were
Yes. No,
over
we're not
or
over.
under?
We're
Okay.
under. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on this section? That all makes sense how it was calculated. And then the next section was, okay, I wanted to understand if we were building, if we compared to new schools being built, just to understand. I mean, when you're building new schools, you know, they just don't build them like they used to as far as education has changed over the years, right? When you look at some of our schools that were built in the 50s and 60s and 70s, compared to new buildings being built now, they build them differently as far as the spaces go. And so this really kind of highlights that. This is comparing this column right here, which says area school median. So in 2014, there was an article out there that took the new schools that were built in our region, the Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin region, and what the student square feet per student was. So how many square feet that entire new building was divided by the number of students it was built for, and gives us a square feet per student, right? So in this article, it was 253 square feet per student for a new elementary school. And to compare that to where we are at right now, if we were to fill our schools up at the target capacity based off of these numbers, you know, we're about half of that, meaning we have quite a bit less square footage compared to what a new school will be built. So it's not saying it's right or wrong, it's just a benchmark or a reference point of a new school versus what we currently have. So it's by no means suggesting that we should be building new schools to meet this. It's just a reference point. Then one additional reference point, because that was national publication that provided that data. I also went to our architect, a local architect that's the largest school architect for schools in the state of Wisconsin who did the high school. I also reached out to them to get their experience on the different schools. And for elementary schools, they are between 180 to 215 square feet per student for elementary schools. And when we go to the middle schools, we're a little bit closer, so 207 versus 131. And then when you go to the high school, we're right there, which we should be because we just renovated that school. So it was kind of a good reference of, okay, we're where we would expect to be since we just did a complete renovation at the high school as far as square feet per student. So those are just references. But yeah, really the with where the district's at and the growth and the development around here, it was just, we felt it was an important piece to gather this information. So as we continue to grow and different situations come up, we have something to reference back to say this is the capacity we have in different schools. Any questions at all?
Have we done a capacity report before, or is this our
No.
first ever?
I don't think we have.
I'm not aware of one before, no.
So I don't think we have done one that is as detailed as this, but we have done capacity reports before. So for example, there was some reporting done before they built Rolling Hills in 2000. And those of you who had children or grandchildren in those buildings at the time before Rolling Hills was built, our elementary schools were packed, much over capacity.
Just a observation, I guess. When you're calculating the number of students per classroom, the assumption being that they're just your typical students and one teacher, or is it taking into account that you might have several students that have special needs or different kinds of wheelchairs or different accommodations needed, along with aids that assist them, which inflates the number of bodies in the room? I mean, is that anything? It's I know it's kind of a hard one to
Yeah.
grasp. I don't know if that's
Yeah, no, it's a
doable thing.
great question. So our special ed students or students that aren't in that classroom, I mean, one of the goals as a district is to get students more included as part of the classrooms. But there's special ed rooms. So for example, Big Bend has classrooms labeled ID and other special ed classrooms that student may be in that classroom part of the day, and then in the normal classroom, in the regular ed classroom during part of the day. So we didn't count them. We counted them as part of being in the regular ed classroom, not in the ID classroom or the other special ed classroom. So they're not getting counted twice. And that room, when you look at that map, you're like, why is that big, 900 square foot classroom not getting counted? Well, it's because we're not adding students from that classroom. We're adding them in the regular ed classroom. And so yes, if likewise, the board policy, when you get close to that maximum number of students in a classroom, it has formulas in there that says you add a 50% teacher's assistant in there. So we are just calculating it off of what that maximum is and then reducing with the efficiency factor. Is that answering the question here?
Well, I guess I'm just thinking when you get to that larger number, it's gonna be more than just 30 students in the classroom. You're gonna have the teacher, your aides, you might have, you're just physically having
Yeah.
more bodies in a room, and does that factor in as to what the practical capacity
From a
of a room would be?
From a square footage piece,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so we'll still be under the code piece of it. So a good example is like at the high school, right? You have the old high school before we renovated, right? If you have a 500 square foot classroom, a 600 square foot classroom, and you physically can't fit that many bodies in it, so with the elementary schools, I mean, most of our classrooms in the elementary schools are 900 square feet, and the bodies will fit in there. It's really when you look at the target capacity piece, it's how well can one teacher effectively teach those students. So when you have those other assistants in there, that just helps with the numbers as far as being able to have more teachers helping those additional kids.
So I guess the bottom line, though, is if you wanted us to consider that, then the board has to change the class size policy. So Kurt's going by the class size
Sure. No, I
policy.
get that.
So he didn't factor in instructional assistants or students with disabilities. If the board wants us to consider that, then you have to change the class size policy.
So, as DPI is going through the process on what's happening with Palmyra Eagle, I would think that looking at this report, this gives you, maybe not us because we don't have that as much knowledge, some insight into, well, if this happens, this could be a problem. If they distribute these many kids, this could be a problem. So do you have, by just looking at this now, are there any concerns without knowing where this is going that you would say, if the state says, you're getting half these kids, are we going to have a problem? Or doesn't the state look at this? I mean, don't they
So
also look at capacity?
So I'm assuming they will look at this type of report for our district or other bordering districts. But at this time, we don't have a concern because first and foremost, let's just theorize.
Okay.
And I do want to stress that the school district boundary appeals board has not even been created. It has not been created yet. I don't know what the holdup is, but the last that we heard from the DPI is that the school district boundary appeals board will be meeting for the first time in mid-September. But if the Palmyra Eagle School District residents get enough signatures on the petition that they are moving around the community to have an advisory referendum, that school district boundary appeal board won't meet until after they see the results of the November 3rd election, which is an advisory referendum only. So I don't think we're going to know a lot in the near future. But our plan is to hopefully get in front of that school district boundary appeals board as soon as possible. That's what we would prefer. And to share with them more about our district, our connection with the students and families in, for example, the village and town of Eagle. We can show them that we do have space, but the Palmyra Eagle School District has an elementary in Eagle, and if someone said you have to make a decision today, you're getting half of the 800 students approximately, I would say we would keep Eagle Elementary open for next school year. And then we'd have space at Parkview and the high school for additional Palmyra Eagle student kids that might come this way. You have to remember that if there are 400 students, theoretically again, you divide that by 13. So K through 12. I know it won't be nice and even, but hopefully it will be distributed somewhat evenly. But yeah, we're confident we can, again, if someone would say you get half the kids, we're confident we can handle that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just curious.
Cherry.
Okay, my question is, you said about, the new schools are the 253 targeted and we're at 155. But like you said, education has changed, so, and what that means is like there's more breakout rooms and there's more of these kinds of spaces, common spaces in the building. So when we look at this, if we would get, I know in some of the buildings, I know Section has taken some of their rooms and converted them into something else. So if we would get to a place where we're above what the capacity is, would we take those classrooms and put them back into classrooms? Or when you did this capacity report, were any of those thought processes as far as, we're putting in these new goals, our reading workshop, those requires a little more
Mhm.
spaces and things, so
Mhm.
how does that fit into this information that we have?
So really, one thing that we did do was we said that, for example, Section and Big Bend are 3-section schools. So even though they've converted some of their learning spaces into non-classrooms, we would expect that if they get to the point where more students need to be added, that at the very least, they have enough classrooms for 3 sections at every grade level, K through 6, for Section and for Big Bend and Prairie View and Rolling Hills. And actually, Rolling Hills has a couple extra classrooms that, as you know, Sherry, your kids went there, Lucas went there, that there's 2 additional classrooms there, so they have enough for 3 at each grade level plus 2.
So the answer is,
And Clarendon would be 4.
When you figured it out, the classrooms that they're using now would stay as they are, and they still have room for the 3 sections, that's what you're saying?
Yes. But there would be some changes, and some of the changes would be a little tougher than others.
Anything else?
Great, great info.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, just student learning committee review, real quick.
The Neola policies, we're going to look at again, because there were some questions and more information needed. And staff development review, the staff has worked hard. Do you want to share, or?
Yeah, I just wanted the board to know that the staff members did put in their 8 hours to make up for the snow day from last year, and all did heavy curriculum work this summer. Our K2 team was in here for Super Kids, continued Super Kids training and curriculum development. Our 3-6 team had training on assessments and workshop for 4 hours, and then the author of a grammar book that we're developing the scope and sequence for in 3-6 came in and did training. That made up their 8 hours, and then the 7-12 teacher teams were in here working on common assessments. They had a 4-hour presentation from an administrative team in Pewaukee that Nick had hired to come in, and then started work on common assessments as buildings. So they've been putting in quite a bit of time this summer coming in and out of the buildings.
And then for the new curriculum, she brought together what they all did, and they've all been approved already. It's just a matter of the work they did. And they're in your packet that you got, if you'd like to look at them.
In the learning committee
Your
packet.
packet,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So the new course is the curriculum work that was done this summer.
All right, any questions on that? All right, unfinished business, superintendent report.
Real quick, I've already talked about Palmyra Eagles School District update. Did anyone else have a question about that? No? Okay, then there really isn't a lot to report right now. And then the balloons over Mugwanago. So although there's been no official decision, I do believe, and I've heard from the Chamber of Commerce and the Village of Mugwanago, that they would like to have balloons over Mugwanago again next year at, on our property. And so I was asked to bring it to your attention and see if there were any concerns.
Just if they can control the weather so it's not 100 degrees.
So this activity definitely is weather dependent, and obviously it was, the attendance was down because of the really, really hot weather on Friday, and then Saturday the thunderstorms. And so, yeah, we'd love to be able to control that.
I
But
think they did say that they were locked into this weekend this time, but it would potentially be a different time of the year even.
right,
Repeat.
yep, I think that they're looking at different dates. They're looking at other activities that they could have at the same time that would not be so weather dependent, so people would still come. I don't know what those might be.
Christmas parade.
It could be. I'd much rather be in the Christmas parade at that time of the year than in December, but I don't know if that's gonna fly.
Literally.
No pun intended. So I think it went off well, except for the weather. I think it went well. I don't think we had.
It was cool. It was
Yeah.
cool.
That was cool.
It's good.
And
It was hot.
And again, I'd be the one first promoting that we have to get the public using our facilities more and more, because from like the development program that we ran up with the chamber through the high school last week, there's going to be growth in district, and then depending on whatever happens with Palmyra Eagle, you know, sooner or later, we're probably gonna be asking, or future boards are going to be asking for, you know, more money to grow our facilities, which is a good thing. If you're not growing, you're dying. And the more they use them, you know, same with the adult classes and things like that, that we still need to get involved in. I think it's positive, so.
That was sponsored by First Weber. Art Schneider,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Come again.
And that's all I have.
All right.
Yeah, just whack them.
In terms of board president report, the only thing I have for you is I would like for you to write down a save the date for the WASB convention coming up in January, where you can join me there, seeing that I'm the delegate yet again. January 22nd to the 24th. So, you're not busy. It's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesday, Thursday are full days. Friday's a half day. You don't have to commit to all of them. You can come to part.
I think I have to work.
When's the cocktail
Oh,
hour?
wait.
Oh, you're going to be retired. You're retired.
There's your two other delegates.
The delegate assembly could be an interesting thing to come and see. Even if you're not the delegate, you can still be there, especially if there might be an interesting resolution that might be presented at the delegate.
Is there a
and it's here in
secret
Milwaukee.
It's here in
handshake or
Milwaukee.
anything?
No, but there are paddles, so you have to have a paddle. It's here in Milwaukee at the Wisconsin Center, Midwest Express Center. What else has it been? Was it a Delta
Oh,
Center?
it's been Southwest.
Southwest, yes. So currently the Wisconsin Center. I would love to have you guys
Thanks for the 411.
join me. So there's your fair save the date.
Send out invites.
That was your invite. I invited you in person. More personal, more effective. All right, that's all I got.
And as far as legislation, correspondence, and board member questions, I did include an article from the Journal Sentinel in your packet about the Wausau School Board and their resolution to try to eliminate all Native American mascots, nicknames, etc.
Thank you, Tony.
And then I also included an update from the WASB that was sent out via email today that said school board should be actively involved in the resolution process. So I wanted to share that with you too.
We always do that. We're always involved in that.
So if there is a desire from the school board to have a resolution, the deadline is September 15th. Now, we don't have a school board meeting prior to September 15. So if there was a desire amongst the board to have a resolution, we'd have to have, schedule another board meeting. You may want to send the idea of a resolution to a committee. I'm not sure which committee it best fits with, but they could put together a resolution and then meet before September 15, and then the full board meet before September 15, if that's something of interest to you. I can't.
Resolution for what?
So I guess,
Anything. You could put
Okay,
on
Mary,
anything.
what was your question?
I have a question. With the current state law, we get a tribe to back us, or to, I don't remember how is it written, I can't remember. Before anything happens, are we grandfathered in?
I'd have to read that state law again. I did read
I don't remember how it
part of the state law and the description of the state law this weekend, just to review again how that process works at the local level if someone wants to change the Native American logo or nickname.
If we wanna keep it, don't we have to get?
No, and the state law protects us as we are right now.
But if we get a tribe to
Endorse us.
Yeah, but,
endorse us or whatever, how you wanna put it.
right,
I can't
then
remember how that
won't
works.
happen.
right, but we don't need to at this time.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
They have to change the whole law.
Yeah,
So
nobody,
I think,
it's not,
Local control, you put up a referendum, put it on the ballot.
yeah, but
It's
there's
easy.
no,
It's a done deal.
there's no chance of a law being changed right now anyways. Doesn't matter.
so I think Art is correct, that even if there is support from other school boards regarding the Wausau resolution, and right now it sounds like Sun Prairie and Madison, maybe MPS, a couple of others I read recently might consider it. That would go to the resolution committee, and they meet, Erica, when again? In October?
Like, yeah, early October and then mid-November.
Okay, they meet a couple of times, and then they decide which resolution should be sent to the convention, to the delegate assembly. And if you recall, we look at all of those resolutions at our first meeting in January. Now we'll do it in December, and then you guys decide what should Erica vote for and what should she not vote for. But even if that
Even if,
resolution would
right.
go to the delegate assembly and the delegate assembly would approve it, that doesn't mean that the state law changes.
No.
What that does mean is that the WASB as an organization then would promote that or lobby for a law change. But I agree with Art that there is very little chance with the Republican-controlled Assembly and Senate that they are going to change the current state law.
So I would like to clarify, however, if a resolution gets voted in at a delegate assembly and becomes part of the policy and resolution handbook, it stays there indefinitely until someone else proposes something else and it gets taken out. So while that may not be an issue right now, think down the road, it could still be sitting there if it gets passed. I personally don't see it leaving policy and resolution committee. I don't, and that's having sat on that committee for 2 years. But there is a chance that it could, and if it gets to delegate, I could see it passing at the delegate assembly. So it kind of depends on what comes out of policy and res. And this is just my opinion. I don't know. I could be way off. And at that point, you can decide, do you want a counter resolution? I think that's the reason Sean said that, because I had asked him earlier. It had been suggested, like, hey, you guys could get together and have a counter resolution, because I could potentially cancel them out at policy and res. There's no guarantee of that. I don't think we have to worry about it, but there is always a chance. And just because it sits in that handbook doesn't mean it's going to become anything ever.
So it's truly just politics. There's really not a mascot issue in Wausau.
It's a
or
bunch of
Madison.
grandstanding.
It's truly just politics, which I think is a bunch of crap. Just saying. Is there a problem in Wausau? No, not a bit. Is there a problem in Madison? No, there really isn't. So it's really just about politics. I think that's wrong.
And yet they still have the right to submit any resolution they want.
I mean, we can
And
write-
then it goes through the motions.
Well, if
So it
we
depends on.
ideas out there, huh?
No
No better ideas out there?
A lot of people
I think there
wanna
might be
talk
more.
about everything.
I think there are good ideas that are probably coming through, but yeah. So I think we just kind of keep an eye on it.
I think we should get together and come up with some cool resolutions on our own.
Yeah, not necessarily about that,
Right,
but
right.
anything,
You know,
you know,
size of the bubbler or
anything.
something. Okay.
All right.
I think the bubbler idea might be a good one. We can run with that. It will simply re-endorse my efforts to encourage you all to come to this year's WASB convention in January 22nd to the 24th at the Wisconsin Center, and come and see the delegate assembly.
Next.
So are there any other board member questions for us?
What day is that?
I'll send you a text, Art Schneider.
You'll have a showing, I'm sure.
Because if not, that's all we have.
No questions?
Motion to adjourn.
Board member questions?
Okay, I think Andy technically
Second.
motioned. Was that a question or a
Or
motion?
do you have a,
We haven't met with them yet.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
And-
Anything else? No? We're good? Okay, all those in favor?
aye.
Oh, all those opposed. 8:05, ladies.